Hey everybody, this your boy J Mace inside the time machine on WUAG 103.FM, playing the best of new and old school hip hop, R&B, and everything else in between. With me on the phone right now, I have Jerry Barnes, one half of the 80s group Juicy. Mr. Barnes, welcome to the time machine, sir.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I appreciate you taking the time out to do this interview.
Oh, no problem. It's my pleasure.
Alright, now let's go ahead and get this started. Now, how did you and your sister cut your teeth prior to Juicy?
Well, I don't know if you know this. We're actually based out of North Carolina. Our father was our manager. We started from Enfield, North Carolina, and our first band was called the Third Generation, and we used to play the local clubs all around the area. And I can't remember, our first national shows were with Lakeside. We used to open for Maze and Cameo and SOS and Brainstorm, a lot of groups.
So pretty much the big funk groups of the 70s and of the 80s, right?
In the late 70s and 80s, we were actually, our local playing was in the late 70s. We did a lot of clubs in the North Carolina area in the South. And in the early 80s, we signed to Arista Records with Clive Davis. Our producer was Deodato, and we did our first album. Our single at the time was Love's a Merry-Go-Round. You know, we came home and we've been more playing in the area. You mentioned you were from the Gaston area. We played at Lake Gaston, and we were pretty much a local band that had a major record deal. And we didn't really tour to the mid-'80s like the rest of the country.
Alright, and by you being from around that area, did you guys ever do this little club right by Squire Elementary School called Sunset?
I'm sure we did.
And now explain for those that may not be from the area where we're from, what's Enfield, North Carolina, and the surrounding areas like?
Okay, well, my father's Army retired. My mother's from that area. It's a town of about 3,000 people, really small town. We live out in the country, and thank God we had music. I think that's why we were able to practice and focus, because we were pretty much isolated from the city environment that we had before. You know, when we were kids, my father, we were in Germany, Texas, and Massachusetts, and we were around Army bases. So we had a lot of diversity and exposure in those areas. When we moved out in the country, we were very isolated, but luckily we had music. My father used to manage bands, so we had equipment, and we started playing. It was a natural process. The town didn't even know we were doing it until we started doing the clubs. So, you know, it was pretty funny. I mean, we built our following slowly, and it was sort of by osmosis. Next thing you know, people were like coming to the shows going, I didn't know you played bass, and my sister was a singer, and we were both singing. You know, it was actually a very natural process for us, the way we evolved to who we are from that area, actually.
So it pretty much was like a grassroots following.
I would say so, but more than less, our development was grassroots. Like, we started from there, and of course, you know, we listened to the radio and watched TV like everybody else, and our dream was to be in the music business when we got out of high school, and it came true.
So what was the process like, you know, getting your first deal and making the debut album?
The process, wow, I hope my memory serves me right. My father met some writers who were involved with Deodato, and they wrote some songs for us, for our band. And Deodato had a meeting with record companies to shop some new talent around. And we were on one side of the cassette, and the band was on the other side. And I think he played our side by accident, if I'm telling the story right. He played our side of the cassette by accident, and the record company liked it. Then we went to New York to showcase for Clive Davis and RCA, Robert Wright, all these different labels. And we were signed immediately, and then we started working on our first album.
And what was it about that period of the late 70s, early to mid 80s that made it so good for like bands and like funk groups, like, you know, you mentioned Lakeside and Maze, like BT Express, Confunction, Graham Central Station, Tower of Power?
Well, I think the magic of that time is really people playing together, groups of similar mindset. Unfortunately, we don't really have that now in black music. We have it in gospel music as far as, or R&B flavor. We have kids playing together in gospel music, but we have really no bands in R&B urban. Everything's programmed, or drum machines, or computer-based. I'm actually very sad about that. I do hope some of these kids that play in bands will do some R&B, and that's why a lot of the artists right now get kids that play in the church to play in their bands, because they're the only people that are playing that have some bands together, some collective bands already together. But The magic truly is, and I say this to everyone, is people playing together. That time was so special because all those groups that you named, everybody created their own sound. But what made that sound was the combination of all the individuals. And that's why all those records sound different and special in their own way.
Because some of the R&B songs during that period, I'm listening to the bass line, I'm like, I'd rather have a nice bass line over something that's on like Fruity Loops on any other producer computer tool any day of the week.
You know, like I said, that time was people, individuals, you know, we practice. I still practice. But that period of time was individuals, you know, playing their instrument. And the funk era was incredible for me coming up as a kid because all the bass lines were great and they were loud. You know, you could hear every note. So it was easy to learn them and get excited. And, you know, I play with Now Rodgers and Chic now. And, you know, those bass lines like Good Times and We Are Family and Freak Out, those bass lines are almost songs by themselves.
And during that period, it was kind of a divide because you had your black label people dissing hip-hop and not really accepting it, and they were pretty much stuck on the contemporary R&B scene, like with Billy Ocean, Freddie Jackson, pretty much your 9 to 5 buppies, Colt 45 music, and they pretty much didn't really see the cash cow potential in rap and hip-hop during its infancy.
I'm not really sure. I think there's always differences in generations, and people are not necessarily as open-minded as they should be. And unfortunately, with soul and classic soul music, a lot of the A&R guys that were involved were either fired or let go for younger guys or new people who were part of the new trend. It was easy for those departments to fade away.
Yeah, because you definitely hear about that a lot. Then of course it didn't really capture mainstream's attention until, of course, Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin with Def Jam, and they saw how much noise Def Jam was making. So now, what's the process like going through making the It Takes Two album, which was put on Private Eye Records, which was I believe a boutique label of CBS Records, which was then ran by, at the time, Walter Yetnikoff?
That was our second album. That was after we left Arista, and we actually had our first hit record, which was Sugar Free, from that album. We recorded it in New York. The most important thing I remember about that album was that was the beginning of Katreese and I writing, you know, the beginning of us really coming into our own as songwriters. And from that came Sugar Free and the rest of the songs on the It Takes Two album.
And did you guys expect Sugar Free to be as big as it was? Then, of course, AZ sampled Sugar Free for Sugar Hill.
Right. Sugar Free has been sampled 3 times that I know, well, maybe more, actually. One was Granddaddy IU. One was Biz Marquis. You just mentioned AZ, and there's another record from LA, from Compton. It was a West Coast rapper that sampled it. I can't remember the name of the version, but it's been sampled. And I even talked to Irv Gotti about 2 years ago. He said he had sampled it again and did another version, but I never heard that version, so maybe it didn't work out.
That's a little tidbit. I did not know that. So how did you feel about those artists sampling your work?